So now that we're living in difficult times, it's time for us to really get cracking with preparing to meet the needs of our families. If you haven't done so yet, I'm sure that a lot of the events that you're seeing in the world have convinced you that something strange is going on. And there's a lot of people with reprobate minds that are trying to control the world. And we have to start fending for ourselves. So in today's video, I'm going to show you how easy it is to take all of those thoughts that are in your mind where you think, I don't know where to start. How do I prepare? What do I do? And I'm going to show you exactly what you need to do in the next couple of days so that you can clear your mind and start acting now. Thing that helped me was to have a notebook. I use this notebook for my prepping, and it just helps me to clear my mind. And the reason that I have this information in a notebook is because I live in a state that is prone to hurricanes, and there's always going to be emergencies here. So I want to make sure that I always have these things written down so that whether I'm here or my son is here and I'm not here and I'm traveling, whoever it is that's here knows what it is that we have to do. But a lot of the prepping that is going on right now is a little bit more than just that. Where an emergency for a hurricane, you may receive a lot of help. But in this situation, we may not be receiving help from the government or from anybody. So it's really up to us to take care of ourselves. So the first thing I want you to do is have a place to write all of this stuff down and keep notes of everything. I'm going to go through some of the things that are in my notebook today, so that you can also act. So the first thing I want you to do is in your notebook is I want you to keep an inventory of those things that you are using that are canned, they're dry goods, things that last longer like rice, beans, things like that. Go ahead and put those in your notebook so you know that these are the kind of things that you can put to the side and use in the future. If you don't have like a 20-pound bag of rice, things like that, you want to make sure that you have enough for your family. An inventory of the things that I commonly use also. So I have one for my pantry. I have one in my refrigerator. I have a page also for my freezer. What are the things that I have in my freezer? And these are the things that even though I'm not out of, I know that I'm going to continue to buy because they're the things that I want to have in stock all the time if something were to happen. When something does happen, I want you to know the first couple of days, it's going to get crazy out there. And the last thing you want to do is go to a store when there's so many people that don't know what's going on. There's chaos and mayhem in the street. You want to be able to be self-sustainable for at least a couple of months, at least 3 months, until things start to have some order. Hopefully they will start having some order. So you don't want to put yourself in a position when you're going outside. I did read somewhere that somebody said, well, then everybody's going to know if you're not going out that you have stuff. I mean, all of us have to realize that pretty much all of us have stuff. I mean, I think pretty much everybody's saving stuff. So at this point, it's really more about protecting what you have than anything else. You're going to keep a list of your inventory, what's in your pantry, what's in your freezer, what's in your refrigerator. If you have stuff that's dehydrated, if you are growing a garden, what are you expecting to have at a certain time of the year? Can you do water bath canning? You don't necessarily need like, a special pressure cooker, but a lot of things you can freeze, a lot of things you can. So these are the kind of things that you can work on later. But right now we just have to get an inventory of what you have and what you can store that you have right now away so that you can start buying, more rice, more beans, things like that for the days coming ahead. The other thing I want you to do is, and we're going to talk about some of these things here, but you need to have certain tools in your kitchen that don't work on power. So if you were cooking and you were cooking outdoors or in your backyard or something like that, you also have to have tools where you know that you'll be able to cook outdoors. So do you have a cast iron or a stainless steel, something where you can cook outside? This is important because a lot of the flimsy cookware is not going to be able to take the heat of being outside. So it's important for you to make sure that you have items where you can cook outside. Maybe it's a long stem barbecue tongs or a brush barbecue brush that you can use outdoors for cooking. So those are things that you have to take inventory of as well, that you may be cooking outdoors. Let's get to the meat of this, because now after we've done that, we really have to ask ourselves a lot of questions. Right, inside of my notebook, I have a series of questions that I ask myself. And this is kind of like you just brain dumping and writing ideas down. Not necessarily having a plan, but just getting things out of your brain so that you can think and then you can act on them. So the first question that is in my page is going to have one question per page, and you're just going to write, whether it's the front and the back of the page, it doesn't matter, write as much as you want, but I want you to really vividly see the scenario in your mind. The first question you're going to ask yourself is what to do when the electricity goes down. Okay, so the reason that I put this question first is most of us are going to have things at home where we can continue to cook and live on for the next month, hopefully, if something were to happen, okay? But the power outage is going to be a big one, and that's one that you have to be able to answer right now. So if your power went out right now, your fridge is going to go off, okay? So your fridge can last, depending on the weather and where you are at, your fridge can last for a long time, maybe a day or two, if you're not opening it, okay? The other thing is, if you have a freezer, the freezer is a great place to store all your extra stuff and really pack it in well, because you're not going to be opening that as much. That's going to keep cold much, much longer, especially if you're wrapping it maybe in blankets to try to maintain it insulated from the outside as well, from the elements. Number two, if the power goes out, what about air conditioning? Is there somebody at home that requires to be kept cool? Or you have a problem with heat, then perhaps you need to get yourself a battery operated fan, or get yourself one of the solar generators that are out now. These are things that you have to think about if you have the money for these kinds of things, but you really have to ask yourself these questions. What if the power went out? What can I do? Where can I cook? If the power goes out and you can't cook a meal, do you have cans? Do you have something portable in the house that you could use in order to cook if you're living in an apartment? If you're not living in an apartment, can you take a portable cook stove outside and cook with that? These are things that you need to ask yourself. What about lights? Your house is going to be dark and you don't want to be walking around with flashlights all the time, right? So what do you have in the house to keep the house lit during the evening hours? Especially of your children and they get bored, you have books to read. You want to keep their minds away from the problems, okay? There's going to be a lot of stress. People are going to feel stressed. They're going to be overexcited. And if you have problems with people in the house that have mental illness, you also have to keep that in mind as well, that they are going to be emotionally unstable during this time. So it's up to you to have things to entertain them. So you should have some books, maybe do some reading. You should have a good light that you could read at night and things like that. You also got to ask yourself, are you going to be able to flush your toilet? If you have a water pump like me and the electricity goes out, you won't be able to do that. So do you have a bucket with a toilet lid on it? This is a good thing to have, because in case of an emergency and you can't flush toilets, you're going to start having to use a bucket and you're going to have to go outside and bury these items. Now, you won't have any smells if you don't mix the two. So you should have also a pee-pee jug for people to pee into, so that they're not mixing number one and number two. Number one and number two together in a bucket is going to smell really bad. So you want to make sure that you're separating both things and you're burying number two outside, and then number one, you can just toss it outside as well. Also, bath water is another thing that you want to have as well. You want to be able to have some jugs of water. So if you can't take baths, you could at least feel better by sponge bathing, and that always seems to help as well. Number two, this is really important. Now the power is out. So you have to write in your book what to do with my refrigerated foods. This is going to be on page 2 of your notebook. You're going to write what comes to mind. So for me, I wrote that I would store most of my stuff, most of my bulk stuff is going to be in the freezer. And if there's any space in my freezer, I'm going to top those off with water bottles that are frozen. Right now, my freezer has frozen water bottles, frozen like bricks with juice bottles. My freezer is jammed to the top and there's no air space in there because I wanted to keep as cold as possible. And that's how you have to pack your freezers at this point right now. Don't leave any empty space in there. You know, if there's empty space in there, put a water bottle filled with water and keep that space closed, not open with air, because this is how you're going to be able to pack your freezer and keep for the longest amount of time without power. You might have a power outage that comes back in 3 days, so you can keep a lot of your food because your freezer will be able to insulate because you have packed it really well. You also should have vinegar for a lot of the foods in your refrigerator. A lot of the vegetables that are in your refrigerator, you can chop them up and put them into glass bottles. If you aren't saving your glass bottles right now from the kinds that you recycle, you should be. All the glass jars that you are buying for pickles and mayonnaise and all of that, you should be saving these jars in your house, because in an emergency, if you had 2 or 3 or 4 gallons of vinegar, which is something you should be on your shopping list, is lots of vinegar, you can pour those in the jars and you can chop up your vegetables and put them in vinegar and they will store in there for a long time. You can do this with peppers. You can do this with onions. You can do this with zucchini and cucumbers. Cucumbers, make sure you chop them thick and not thin. So a lot of vegetables that are in your refrigerator that might go bad because it's starting to defrost and the humidity is getting and condensation is getting in there. Before that happens, take them out, put them in jar, and chop them up and put them in jars, top them off with vinegar, and they will preserve for a long time. Once the refrigerated foods are kind of soft, maybe the next day they're soft and they don't look pleasing to eat, but you could still dehydrate them. If the power came back and you had a dehydrator, you could toss those, or anything that was in your freezer that was frozen that now is just wet because there's no ice. A lot of this stuff, if your power comes back the next day, you could actually dehydrate them. Another thing to think about, if your power goes out, what are you going to do with your well pump? And that's something that I've had to answer here. And like I said, I have to be able to not be able to use my bathroom, not be able to use my toilet, not be able to use, so I have to have stored water and I have to be able to harvest rainwater. So do you have things to harvest rainwater? Do you have garbage cans that you could, for bathing and for cooking? And you could boil this water. You could drink this water. I know it's in plastic, it's in containers, but you could drink this water if you boil it. Another option for you is if the power does come back, you could fill up your bathtubs at home all the way to the top with water, so that if the power does go out, you also have this water in your bathtub that you are storing as well. A lot of things that I use is I learned to reuse the water. So if you have water bowls for dogs that you throw out daily and you give them fresh water because there's slobber in there or there's hair in there, this water you can use if you put it in a bucket and start pouring this type of water, so that you can reuse this water for your garden. And if you have a garden, or if you need to use it, other types of things that are not cooking, but they're for waste, for cleaning, for different things like that, you could use them. You could use pasta water for your garden. Anything that's a shower water, if you take a shower, you want to be able to collect that water. You can also use that water as well for your garden. When you're bathing, you can save that water, put it in a bucket, and also use it for your garden. Try to not cook as much food that uses water until you actually have rainfalls of water. So you're going to want to use your canned foods and things that don't consume a lot of water during this time. Have a list of those foods. What are the first foods that you could eat if you don't have rainfall? You can't collect the water. What are the types of foods that you can eat? You should make a list of those now. If you have any containers inside of your garage that is storing, or even in your house, in your closet, we ladies like to have like shoes in containers, pretty boxes. I mean, we're talking about plastic boxes, not, you know, cardboard or anything like that. But if you have Tupperware in your house, if you have any type of storage containers in your garage with items, take the items out and set all of the containers out on a rainy day, because they will collect water for you. So you don't need to have your shoes inside your closet. Take your shoes out, put all of these containers outside, and you can start collecting water that way. Another question for your book is, what is your daily routine going to look like without power? So I want you in the morning tomorrow when you wake up is to make a list of your normal routine, and especially like for the kids, what is their routine if they didn't have school? You want to try to keep your routine as normal as possible, because it's a very nervous time for everybody, and emotions run high. People get nervous, they get scared, fear sets in. So you want to be able to keep your routine as normal as possible. Some things you can't do, but the gist of it is you do. So what do? You make coffee in the morning. Okay, this morning we don't have power. So what do? I go outside and I make my coffee, or I make my breakfast, or I make breakfast outside for the kids. We all sit at the table. We all do pretty much the same things that we always do, and try to keep that routine going, that disciplined routine, to try to keep everybody in a happy state of mind. Make sure that you put that down tonight. Write down your average routine. Write that down, because these are the things that you're going to have to do. If you are changing a baby or diapers, what are you going to do when you can't get diapers at the store? You should be stocking up also on fabric diapers as well, in the event that you can't get diapers. You need to have things to sterilize them. You need to have something to wash clothes with in the event, or your baby's items. So you should have a big giant, maybe Tupperware container where you can put water in there when it rains, and you can wash your baby's items. Now remember, a lot of this water, after you wash diapers and things like that, you can use this stuff in the garden to water your plants with. It's perfectly fine. Babies usually are not sick and they're healthy, and you know, even though they have excrement in the water, it's just additional fertilizer for your food. So you could use this stuff for that. Next question that you're going to ask for another page of your book is what to do about banking and cash. Okay, banking and cash is important. How much money do you want to keep in the house? How much do you want to take out of the bank? Do you want to open an account with a credit union because you are dealing with a federal bank, and you rather have some money locally in a bank locally that's not a federal bank? Do you want to have a place in the property where you do bury? Maybe you need to buy a certain type of cash box where you bury it in the property with a certain type of money or something like that. Those are the kind of things that you need to put down on paper, and then you need to, if you're a couple and you're married, you need to discuss these things, and you need to have a marker or know or count or measure where that box is going to be, and keep a record of that, so that you know, and your family members know where this is as well. Now that the gasoline prices are high, a lot of people are not traveling, they're not going out, they're staying home. So what are you going to do when the gasoline prices are high and you have to get to the store to buy stuff? Is there people that you can maybe, you know, travel with and have a certain day of the week, maybe your church group, people can join together and take a drive, everybody in one car, and everybody chips in a little bit of money for gasoline. So these are the kind of things that you can sit down and talk with family members with that live with you or live nearby, with your neighbors as well. So you can do things like that, especially if you're like me, you're like 6 miles out. These are the types of things that you might be able to work out with, bringing up to the attention of your church, so that they can start implementing some of these things for the people in their community. So the next question that you need to title in the next page of your book, of your notebook, is going to be what to do about medicine. What are you going to do about medicine? How much medicine do you have? If you take medicine that's absolutely needed, like heart medication or things like that, are you able to get maybe a vacation supply? You can call your doctor and say, look, I think I'm going on vacation. I need to have an extra supply and keep an extra month on hand. These are the kind of things that we have to start to do. You might also need to start doing some research about some herbs, tinctures, oils, essential oils, teas, different things that you could use in the event that something were to happen and you couldn't get medication. Perhaps there are medicinals out there in plants that you could purchase and you could store also in bulk. In case you did run out, at least you were taking something rather than nothing, but at least it's better than nothing. Remember, you won't be eating as much. Your portions for food won't be as much. If you have children, you will probably, as a parent, be giving most of your meat portions to your children. And you're just going to be eating less. You're probably not going to have 3 meals a day, or if you do have 3 meals a day, it's going to be very simple. You're probably going to do a lot of fasting during the morning, where your meal's going to be more during the afternoons. And you're going to be going to bed earlier as well. When the lights go out, you're probably going to get up earlier during the day. It's going to take a lot longer to do a lot of the things that we usually do. Like usually, you throw clothes in a washing machine and then go outside and water the plants. Well, now it's not going to be like that, because now you have to take a day to actually hang the clothes up. And that's another thing you have to do. When you're doing laundry, do you have a place to hang up your laundry where you can dry things? This is another thing you need to ask yourself. So that's going to be for a separate page, that you should also ask yourself about laundry and washing and all those kinds of things, or questions that you need to also ask yourself in the event something happened. Do I have to do it more frequently? I mean, instead of, maybe you have to wash every couple of days so that you can hang these items inside your bathtub so that they could dry. Or maybe every time that you bathe, you have to also, when you're bathing, wash these items. Another question that you have to ask yourself is, what about communication with family? Like, some of us live far from our family. If internet goes down, if cell phone service goes down, how are you going to communicate with your family? For me, what I did was I stocked up on stamps, because at least, hopefully, the mail service will still be running, the postal, and at least every couple of weeks, every week or so, I can send my mom a letter and let her know that I'm doing okay and what's going on. That I'm hoping would happen. There's really no other way that I feel, because I know she's not going to get a ham radio. I'm not going to have a ham radio and take the expense to buy things like that. But at least stock up on stamps, so hopefully you'll be able to send somebody a letter and communicate with your family members. Or maybe there's a certain place that you need to talk about. Write that in your book and say, well, after a month, we're going to go to maybe our cabin in the woods. If things get bad here, we can always meet at this location, and have a place where you can all meet, a place like that, and have every family member understand where these are the kind of things you need to write in your notebook, so you know what's going to happen, and you can discuss these things with them as well, and that everybody is told. Because in case you get separated, you want to know where you're going to be. You're going to have to learn to make a lot of the basics. For me, that's what I do. I make a lot of the basics. Like, if you don't, you're not be able to go and get pancake mix in the store. So how do you make pancake mix? How do you make pancakes from scratch with flour and different things like that? How do you make butter? How do you make ice cream? How do you make so many things that are not going to be available at the store? Because I've heard recently that we only have 10 weeks of wheat available in the supply chain. So I wrote a list here of flour substitutes that I could use. So if you're not able to get flour, you can substitute different things. So the top ones that I wrote here are barley. If you bought barley, you can grind them. For me, I have a Vitamix. So if you have a Vitamix, you can grind. I have a grinding canister. I have 2 canisters with my Vitamix. I have the grinding and I have the other one. So I could grind barley into barley flour. You could grind oats. So if you're buying oats for oatmeal, old-fashioned oats, you can grind those and use that flour for a lot of your recipes to substitute for wheat. You can use coconut flour. With coconut flour, you do have to add extra eggs. So I don't necessarily recommend it unless you have chickens and have lots of eggs. You can use buckwheat flour, millet. If you're buying millet grain, you can grind that up and use that. If you have almonds or make almond milk, you can also make almond flour with that. Chickpea is actually my favorite because it's really pretty close to regular flour. So if you take chickpea and you grind it really fine, you can make a flour with that. The other one is brown rice flour. So a lot of people don't buy brown rice because brown rice can go rancid because it does have oils in it. But remember that brown rice is a good substitute for flour. So you could grind that and use that also. And the last but not least is corn flour as well. You can also use that. You can make tortillas and different things and substitute. If you can't have bread, you can make at least tortillas or pita or different things. There's 2 more that were on my list. Actually, there's 3 more on my list. They're not so easy. If you have access to an amaranth plant, and recently I went to a permaculture home where they showed us the amaranth flour, and that's one thing that I'll be ordering in the future is amaranth. It's a beautiful flour, and you can also use it to make your own flour. There's arrowroot as well, and there is cassava. So if you go to the bulk store and you can't find some of these things, you could buy some of these grains and grind them in the event that there was no actual wheat flour out there. So these are some things that I have in my book that are helpful for me to kind of brain dump and have a list of things that are important. So I'm not knowing what to do. A lot of people go out and they don't have a plan of action in place. So these are some of the things that I've sat down that have helped me to focus on a plan of action so that I can do things slowly every week and know what are the things that I have to invest my money in, know what are the things that I have to do, and have them written down, because in the event that something happened, I'm not stressing. I have it written down. I know because I already thought about it. I knew what the plan was, and I'm not stressing out. If the power went out or if it was raining outside and I needed water, I'd go and make sure that I've already have all of my containers from the garage that are holding tools and old blankets and old things. I'd have those things on the shelf without containers, and I'd have those containers ready to go to collect water. Things like this that you have to write down so when they happen, you're not stressing. So I hope some of these things have helped you a little bit. If there's any other questions that I missed that you need to know or want to know about, please leave it down in the description, because it's very helpful for other people to learn as well. Some of the questions that you're asking yourself, like if this happened, what would I do? Maybe I missed something, I didn't think about something, or it's particular to your area of where you live, where it's very different from mine. So of course, for me, I'm in Florida, so I don't deal with the cold issue like some of you would. So that might be something that you want to look at, is what am I going to do to heat the house if I don't have electricity? How are you going to heat if you depend on, propane or different things like that? How are you going to heat your family at a time like that? So those are the kind of things that you need to sit down, write down, have a notebook, have it all planned out. In case if something happens, it's going to give you peace of mind knowing that you've already gone through these scenarios, you've already planned for them, and you don't have to live a life that's stressed because you've already figured out what you're going to do. So I thank you so much for watching. I hope this video was helpful for you, and if it was, please give it a thumbs up, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Hey, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. Thanks for watching.